Okay, so this is our final of four webinars. Um, and basically up to now, we've been sort of just, laying the groundwork, talking about tactics, like how do you deal with this invasive or not? Well, starting with how do you ID them, and then moving on to different tactics for treatments. And I think there's been plenty of hints throughout about what's the point of all this. And this tonight's presentation will basically be how do you organize your thoughts um, so that you could proceed in a way that's logical, transparent to everyone, um, clear goals, and basically we'll go through the first part of it will be kind of describing all of the steps we take when we do what I always call a full plan. That has all the different possible details. Well, many of them, there's always more. But many of the details that we do when we do a full plan. And then we'll go to examples of full plans and then smaller plans that are, a little bit more practical for, be quite honest, for folks that don't have quite as much time and money to put together a full plan, but still want something actionable. So that's how we'll go tonight. And, like Kim said, please jump in with questions anytime. Okay, so yeah, wow, very long description for tonight. Mapping communities, invasive species abundance and distribution, different types of plans, detailed and complex to concise, formation of stewardship goals, which is present in any plan, regardless of size. And yeah, all the basic goals. And then obviously every site will have its own specific goals that are catered to that particular site. And the overarching goal has to be sort of clear in our minds before we start doing anything, right? The goal is to create or facilitate is probably a better word, ecological health. So in a forest, you have all of the layers, including the wildflowers at the ground level, and reproduction of everything. So young trees, young shrubs, young herbs, the whole work. So that would be the optimum. And then sort of, we know that it's not the optimum. And I've always found it important to, for lack of a better word, philosophy, the stewardship philosophy. And then, usually our plans have a little text box that goes into this a little bit more in detail, but this is the gist. We done and broke it, we should fix it. That's the basic bottom line of it all. And it really depends on, again, how your mind works, how you think about things. But personally for me, it's an obligation. Um, we get everything from her. We probably shouldn't treat her like crap. you know. So when we broke something, we should fix it. That's sort of, to me, what the bottom line is. In the hierarchy, I know I've shown this slide probably more than once already. But deer are the base of the problem. They're the absolute base of the problem. And when you can do something about it, you should. And if you can only do one thing, that should be the one thing. And then if you have the resources, you work your way up the pyramid. So invasives are next, and you start with the most emerging ones statewide first. Regardless of any other goals you have on your site, your first goal should be, for invasive, should be, I've always referred to it as like regional responsibility. You don't want something on your land to go spread to someone else's land. So you start with the early stage ones. You find your highest conservation value areas and you try to restore them to the extent possible, or protect them. And then you move on to the sort of what I consider the finer point, which is restoration. All right, I see a couple hands already. Mary Roberts.
I'm sorry. Yes, I just wanted to say that I wanted to ask if anybody in the group, particularly in counties that are neighboring Union County, I'm going to talk to the commissioner board and see if we can reinstate some of the things that Dan Benier was working on. I don't think it's a total solution, but and then I'm going to get people to show up at um, the actual board meetings. But I was wondering if at the end, if anybody's interested in making, because it has to be a statewide thing too, right? So just if anybody's interested in, I don't know what we can do, but it has to be, like you're saying, the deer is the number one thing to
Yeah,
do.
that it's a tough nut to crack. The only thing I could say on that front is, unlike any other time in my career, there's actually an attempt being made now to have a large scale strategy that is statewide, and it's coming out of New Jersey Conservation Foundation. They have a consultant, and he's been doing a lot of work, and they're kind of building from what they've learned so far, and they'll be providing guidance to all kinds of landowners, including counties, municipalities,
So
land
contact
trusts.
contact them, you think that would be the first
Well,
thing?
I think you have to wait for them to be ready. I think
Okay,
they're putting together things now. Some things are in draft,
okay,
and hopefully there should be no way for you not to hear it if they roll it out correctly, which I'm sure they will.
okay, okay, very good, thank you.
Uh, Peter?
Um, just really fast on the deer end, and I forget if you had mentioned this previously in other classes. Um, we're in my town specifically, it's a exceptionally dense neighborhood where we don't really have a ton of open acreage. And it's is it county, state, or like local law that's like the sort of like uh sort of perimeter for hunting between like a
State
residential neighborhood?
state law requires safety zones.
Safety like 150 feet from the nearest household or something like that. Is that
One
right?
150 for bow, 450 for gun. So that's
Okay.
why management in really dense developments is going to be extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah. Okay. I
Um,
just wanted to double check on that one.
yeah,
And I was curious, like, have you seen instances of folks who have, I mean, gone so far as to like invest in just like, I guess, fencing in open woodlands areas where they're trying to establish,
sure.
you have clearings and forests and whatnot. Is that something that,
You know that people do that when they have funding available to do it. Yeah, the
okay,
deer exclosures. Yeah.
okay, cool.
Um, Yeah,
Sounds
it
good.
really
Thank
is
you.
the biggest issue, and it's the hardest nut to crack. But it's the linchpin, because we know that if deer
Yes.
population is reduced, native species will become much more competitive. They are
Right.
competitive; they're just not be able to express that because they get eaten too much. Um, okay, so stewardship plan structure. Um, So, it's sort of like any kind of report. There's an overview section that talks about the context and the basis for stewardship and having some kind of vision, background on common threats like deer and invasives, a lot of things we've talked about, conservation values, and that could be at the landscape scale, and we'll go into the detail of this. Ecological communities that are on the site currently, and then so you have your values, your challenges, and then what are you going to do about it? So the challenges, obviously, we've talked about this, tier invasives. There could be other things depending on the site, but those two are in common pretty much everywhere. And then strategies and actions, clearly defined actionable goals. So the first step that we typically do is we gather existing information. And the idea is to develop a baseline knowledge of the site. So we use a lot of GIS. We look at land use, past and present, the landscape context. Is it a quick shorthand that we use is, what is the land cover within the site and within a 5 mile radius of the site? So are you surrounded by development? Are you surrounded by open space, farmland, whatever the case may be? So you want to define that. We lean on the 1930s aerial photography. if you're in the northern half of New Jersey, there's actually forest cover from the 1890s. Vermeule. I love the story, so I keep telling it, but he actually mapped out with survey grade quality the every forest patch in New Jersey, the entire state of New Jersey. He traveled on horseback through the 1890s and actually mapped it all out. It was digitized by Rutgers for the top half of the state. It's not digitized for the bottom half. So you can get forest cover in the 1890s and the 1930s.
Would you consider that Union County, top half?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, that exists. Yep. Um, the Endangered and Non-Game Species Program has the landscape project. They're up to version 3.4. That maps out every patch of habitat, and then assigns what rare species are known to be within that patch. It doesn't say exactly where they are. I mean, some things move, obviously, but so that's really valuable. And for most people, if you don't have GIS experience, it's a tricky one to learn. Um, and Conservation Blueprint mercifully is out there, and that gives a lot of the things that I'm talking about and will be talking about. So you can pick up a lot of information using Conservation Blueprint. Um, and I think it just keeps getting better all the time. So you don't have to be a, GIS whiz to get a lot of this information. You can get it through Conservation Blueprint. Not all of these things, but many of the critical things. We look at the underlying geology and soils, and there's sources for those things. We try to understand as much as we can the flora and fauna before we even get out there. So that could be an iNaturalist search. If you want a formal search of what's been documented anywhere, I believe it's $70. You can get a New Jersey Natural Heritage Database search, which would tell you within your site and adjacent to your site what rare species, plants, animals, plant communities have been documented in the past. So these are obviously all good things you want to know ahead of time. And again, this is generally applicable to our most intense plans. So yeah, this is what a 1930s aerial looks like. And you can pick it out, what's historically was forested, what was historically farmed. We had mentioned in the past that there's the highest quality patches now currently are where historic forest occurred in the 1930s. And then, like I said, for northern New Jersey, the 1890s. And I think we've had this graphic, the inset figure 5 here, that basically agricultural soils are so different and so degraded from natural forest soils that they just sort of breed invasive species and other weedy species, including native weedy species. So yeah, so it's sort of critical when you go out there. You could use 1930 aerials as a very strong predictor about what you might see currently. The landscape project is also available on Conservation Blueprint or GIS. And it basically tells you the land use types by patch. You can sort of see one patch here is highlighted in blue. So that patch is a deciduous forest with 10 to 50% crown closure. It's 9.7 acres. And it tells you the rank number 2. The ranks go from 1 to 5. And the values are associated whether the presence of federally listed or state listed species, the ranks go up. So, and it does allow you to tell what's the contiguous patch size. So in this case, it's just under 10 acres. The patch size does tell you quite a bit about what you might expect its viability to be well, they're all viable. It just depends on what's the probability of it becoming more degraded over time. If it's a small patch surrounded by development, its viability is likely to be lower. So you're hoping to see large patch sizes to assist with long-term viability.
Large patch meaning what size?
Oh, well, it varies by species, but yeah, I mean, in a good world, your largest patch would not be 10 acres. It would be 1,000 acres.
Wow.
So, it just depends on obviously the context that you're in and how divided the land is by development or agriculture, quite frankly. Um, so yeah, you're hoping for larger patches, but it's not like you would say, well, my biggest patch size is only 50 acres, so I'm just going to throw up my hands and walk away. Every patch has the potential to be improved, whether it was post ag or not. But I'm just trying to say what the probabilities are higher if it's larger and not previously farmed. So if you start, we map these out. This is a plan that we did for the College of New Jersey and Ewing Township. So it's all of the campus lands, not just what's developed like as the campus, but other land that they own. And just gives you an idea. This is all, pretty technical looking, all these codes and stuff. There's so many different soil types, and it is a whole science unto itself that I'm not going to claim to fully understand. But this is out there. If you go to the US Web Soil Survey, you can get nitty gritty into this. Like every soil type has stability for trails, for example. What types of plants grow on that? That kind of thing, dominant tree species, all those types. So there's a lot of detail underneath all these codes that might sort of guide your decision-making process. Similarly, there's, the underlying geology. What's the geology that underlies everything? So you got I should have done it the other way, where this is your foundation, and then you have your soils on top of your bedrock. Um, certain types of geology are uncommon, but associated with really cool things like basalt from old volcanoes, like in the Watchung area, like in Sourlands area. So sometimes, you see a geology and you have a sense of what might be there or not. I'm not going to say, again, I'm not an expert in either of these things, geology or soils, but I know just enough sometimes where it's like, oh, that really gets my attention. Um, Anything limestone is also really good. That'll be in the northwest portion of the state generally. Yeah, so there's data out there that could be utilized to define your site. And yeah, so iNaturalists, we're just starting to get into this this year, really, and it's sort of almost just dipping our toe in the water a bit, but there's a lot out there. People are collecting data, citizen science, and you could find out what is on the site of interest to you. So the search here was the College of New Jersey, and all of these different, oops, it's not actually a screen clip. All the different species that have been identified there can pop up. So you could have a sense ahead of time what things are there, not just plants, but also bugs and plant diseases. I mean, iNaturalist does a lot of really cool stuff. And I think as people use it even more and more, it's going to become more and more valuable. And it says you could filter to allow selection by organism category, plants, fungi, or whatever. What type of observations? So basically, the way iNaturalist works is I look at it, the AI, and it knows where I'm at, so it knows what species might be in your area. It's not going to say, Western thimbleberry, when I'm in Mercer County, New Jersey. So it knows where you are, and then it knows what's been reported around you already to give you a sense of what something might be, and then it uses the AI from there, and it gives you a probability of knowing what something is. So I, as a person, can do that, use its existing abilities, suggest what I think it is, or I pick from the list what I think it is, and then it's sort of just an observation there. If you want it to become what's called research grade, I believe 2 other users have to confirm what you think. So you could be really selective, like here, research grade, verifiable, research grade, needs ID, so it can give you a sense of how certain the observation is. But as a general rule, yeah, there might be mistakes in there, but it is one heck of a lot more better than nothing for letting you know what might be there. And then this is the formal natural heritage data request. So, there's links on these things, on these slides as well. You can, take a look at them. But it's a very simple 1-page form. And basically, you just have to tell them where you are. And you get all of the wildlife occurrences, plant and ecological community occurrences, as well as vernal pools. And the fee is $70. And this is just a little snippet of what, the output looks like. So this site had glossy ibis. Its rank is 2. It's a special concern, and the global rank and a state rank. So it gives you like details of what's been observed and documented by experts, or if not documented directly by experts, verified by experts. Yes, Blaine.
Thank you. In terms of what's been observed, is it recently, or do you know like the time span for that?
He goes way back. So yeah, you got to check the record dates. If it says, bog turtles last observed 1951, probably a lot of things have changed since then, and they may not be present any longer. So you should note that it gives you, one of the columns is last date observed.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. It gives you everything, and you got to like take a look at it, make sure it makes sense, and that it's not so old that you're not sure if it's there anymore. And you can be surprised too. Sometimes there's things there that aren't documented. That absolutely happens. So it is as good as we can get, basically. But I think, especially for invasive species, maybe not for a rare sedge or something, iNaturalist can surprise you and find rare things that aren't in a database. So it's kind of worth using both if you have the time to do that. Okay. And so then you kind of gather yourself, you have some set of expectations about what the site is like, and then you go out and do your surveys. So we commonly map invasive species and native plant communities. So I'll show you some maps, but the basic idea is you basically create a shape of an area within the park. There's a shaped area that we define by walking and interpreting aerial photos and such. And we say that in that area is a particular native plant community with a particular composition of canopy and subcanopy and ground layer. So we're basically saying this is a particular place, and then overlaid on top of that is, and within that area, there's a particular combination of invasive species, each with its own cover class of cover. So you might say this is a, black oak, red oak forest with 10% cover of barberry and 1 to 5% cover of stiltgrass. Now, if you go to a separate, that forest type might continue, but then the invasive species might change as you walk along. So it might be, okay, same type of native plant community, but now over here it's 25 to 50% barberry, 10 to 25% stiltgrass, et cetera, et cetera. So each polygon is a unique combination of native plant community and combination and cover of a set of invasive species. That sounds complicated. It is. It'll make your head spin when you're out there. But we've done it a lot, so we've gotten fairly good at it. And I'll show you a map just to explain that a little bit better. And then we certainly will take an exact GPS point for any emerging invasive species that we find, because we know that's going to be a high priority for action. We want to tell people, here is exact coordinates for the thing that you want to get, and this is how many, roughly how much is there. So it might be 1 plant, 2 to 10, 11 to 100, 100 to 1,000, greater than 1,000. So you want to, whoever's managing that land, stewarding that land, you know, they should be able to navigate to that point and know what to see. They're going to see before they get there, or have a sense of what's there. You know, if you say, I want to get rid of the Siebold's viburnum and I'm going to bring some people with me, you want to know whether there's 10 of them or greater than 1,000 of them, you know, before you march yourself out there. And yeah, I think I already mentioned this, estimating the infestation severity. We've talked about that. If you happen to find rare plant locations, oftentimes, you know, that's a level of detail that we're not really doing. If we know what might be there ahead of time, we can have our eyeballs thinking, our head and our eyeballs trained to look for them. But oftentimes that's a bridge too far. From occasionally, someone will say, we want to know about species X, and we will add that to our search image and mark out any rare plant occurrences that we happen to find. But oftentimes that's so precise work that you have to kind of go out just for that. And broad ecological communities, I mentioned that, like an oak community or a maple-based community or a mixture. Is it a shrubland versus a forest, a woodland, a shrubland, a meadow? You know, what exactly is the course type? And then specifically, what is the, for a forest, what is the canopy composition? What species are ruling the roost there? We'll also, along the way, be noting deer impacts. And oftentimes that's through our estimate for every polygon. We say, what is the shrub layer? You know, where deer can get at it. Is it trace 1 to 10, 10 to 25? Unfortunately, almost always it's a low number. But we don't document that for every situation, every polygon that we draw, every mapped area. So, and then we see, is there other things we're seeing? Are we seeing a lot of beach cover? Because we know that they're going down. So that's going to have a dramatic impact on recommendations. Oftentimes, sometimes trails are mapped. Sometimes they're not. If they're not, we'll usually map them in the course of our work so we can give people a trail layer. If it isn't been already. And then we take lots and lots of photos, because especially for a large site, your brain can be turned to stew if you look at it 2 months later after you mapped it. So we just take outrageous amounts of photos, so we know what it looked like where. And yeah, so we have our mapping protocols. We delineate a patch. And this is what I described earlier, areas of uniform ground cover, and that means native and non-native. And then we do things in categories. We don't say it's 18.5% cover. You know, you can't do that visually. So you put them in categories. It's either absent, trace less than 1, 1 to 10, 11 to 25, etc. So we put every invasive species for every patch into a category. And we use field maps, which is you know, a GIS tool from the company Esri, and that kind of goes along with like a desktop GIS program. We often are using GPS, Garmin GPS, any kind of solid real GPS units. And I mentioned all those photos, that every one of them is geo-referenced, so we know where they were. If you have a phone and don't have a GPS unit, what you'll find, what I have found, and some people have different, aren't as picky as I am, I guess, but phones have crappy GPSs in them. If you want to turn your phone into a real GPS, you could buy a Bluetooth GPS and slip it into your pocket, Bluetooth it to your phone, and now your phone's a real GPS. Yep, pulling.
Thanks. Just quick question about the class scores. Do they need to add up to 100 with the other invasives there or with the other invasives and natives, or how do you do that?
Yeah, this is
There.
ecology. This is fun. It doesn't have to add up to 100. Oftentimes they're overlapping, so you could have you could absolutely have overlapping covers for different invasives. Um, so yeah, they don't necessarily end up adding to 100, and they're categories anyway. It's not a specific number, but yeah, you could absolutely have overlapping greater than 100%. I use my old joke, if you're old enough, from the 70s or 80s, like our percent cover is like the election of a Central American country, back in the day, and the Banana Republic kind of stuff. The election totals would be more than 100. But yeah, so that's totally legit for what we're doing now. Yeah, and then like I said, here's the the points of where individual emerging species were found. So you would get that is done. Well, that's sort of a very important feature. So sometimes, depending again on who the landowner is and how much detail they want, how much money they have, we've done forest health evaluations that are more detailed. So you would randomly select points in the forest and you would do these types of measurements. So the one that we use the most now is called the Forest Secchi, and it's a whiteboard gridded out to 16 from 10 meters away. You look back at it and you observe how many have at least one green leaf in front of me as you view it from 10 meters away. And basically you end up, okay, it's 5, for native, whatever it is for non-native. And then at the end of the day, when you've done all your points, you have an average cover of native and non-native plants. That could sort of give you a more quantified sense of the cover than just a visual observation without any board helping you. And then we could do a ground layer survey. We look for the presence and absence of woody seedlings and herbaceous species within this. So it gives you a sense. So this gives you a sense of what's the deer impact within the browse zone. This gives you a sense of what might recover in the future. So if you have oodles of oak seedlings that are 2 inches tall, you'd have some sense of how much there is out there, knowing that that is what's going to be the future of your forest, especially if deer aren't an issue. So that could justify, this could be done as a baseline before a deer exclosure, before a deer management is implemented, whatever. And then we look at the canopy layer, because often the canopy layer is associated with what's below it. So if it's a dense canopy, you're mostly going to have less than if you have an open canopy. Plants grow better with more and more sunshine. So now we're currently using a fisheye camera and a program called ImageJ that could separate all the green from the white or blue if it's a clear day, and you get a sense of what's the percent cover of the forest canopy. Then we make lots of maps. They're basically, you're trying to provide evidence justification for whatever strategies you're going to come up. Well, first you're describing what's there. It's a description first, and then this is how you justify what your decisions are based on data. So that's always a good thing. So that includes all the basic stuff before you even walk out there, and then it's all the mapping work that you did. In this project, we mapped out lawn areas because that was areas that had the potential to be transformed into native species cover, meadows, tree plantings, shrub plantings, whatever. So we actually, unlike any other time, we actually mapped out the lawn areas. We did that from our desk because you can see that on an aerial. Okay, so this is sort of what it ended up looking like for this particular project. So what we do, we have our own way of assessing overall. So you get all kinds of measurements, the cover of different things, the shrub layer, the ground layer, And then we basically say, out of all the patches that we mapped out, and you can see how much detail there could be. When things changed or become a different patch number. So we ended up with 108 patches for this all of this land. And we try to make it as easy for ourselves and anyone else as, all right, what's the bottom line? Where are the relative quality here? We're not talking compared to, you know, an Amazon rainforest. Relative within the site, where are the best places, the middle places, the lowest places? And as you might imagine, you're going to make less recommendations for the places that are the lowest quality. We want to try to maintain high quality. We want to bump moderate to high. Those are going to be the most bang for your buck stewardship efforts. It isn't going to be taking the worst of the worst and trying to make it the best. First, keep the best, keep the good and improve that, and see if you can take moderate up to high. See if you can make that better. But yeah, this kind of ready, you know, you shows, you know, okay, well, this is better. Dark green over here and light green. Oof, this looks a little painful here. All this low quality stuff, you know, maybe I don't want to do too much there. But again, it's just a way of taking all of that massive data, including the rare species stuff and everything else, and mashing it into a simple high, medium, low. So you can figure out or justify or explain why you're working in one place and not another. This is the overall resulting map for the species percent cover. So this is for an individual species now, because we have that for all the species across the entire site. Where is the autumn olive? And where it wasn't detected, trace, and then, you know, up to purple. And, you know, just a sort of a logical grade from green to purple. So you could see that there's a lot of it up here. Not too much here, very little here, absent all through here. All right, there's a little pocket right here. So again, that's going to start informing your decisions. And it's down to the species level. And this is sort of a combination. So this is of all the invasive species within all of the patches. We basically have a scoring system. We add it up. And if you're, again, the same color scheme, purple is going to be the most highly infested areas. Dark green is going to be the least infested areas. So again, this is for all of the species, not just an individual one, but we have individual maps for every species. So yeah, all right, well, that looks pretty good. Got some green going down here, dark green, that's good. This purple, that's going to be rough. That is going to be really hard to restore or improve much with that level of degradation. And then we make lots of summary tables. So we communicate the key findings from the GIS and the survey data, try to break it down as much as possible. So with land cover, ecological communities, patch quality, plant species, infestation levels, action codes. So this is one. So all right, so for all of the spots, 8% of the entire site was considered clean. 41% extremely high. You know, and you get the gist. And this is again part of how we determine the relative quality of a particular patch. And then when we have all of the species, each invasive is given an action code 1, 2, or 3. And here's the definition. But basically, 1 is kill every one of them you could find. 2 of them has a scheme of control over time. 3 is don't worry, don't do anything. So, you know, for this site, we had 25 action code 1s that we say they're really dangerous. There's not much of them. This is the time to get rid of them. And then we have, you know, selective control, and then we have just leave alone. And then the report has a table of contents here, you know, basically a little bit more detail than I already mentioned. And this to me is where the rubber hits the road. You know, what we hope is that whoever the landowners are and if they have to communicate with people who aren't particularly tapped into nature, Administrators, things like that, you want to give them one page that summarizes what you think should happen. Again, this is again over a 10-year time period. This isn't 1 year, this is over 10 years. Our number one goal is always going to be whitetail deer management. Our number two goal is always going to be strategic invasive control, focusing on those action code 1 species. And then when you get down to recommendation 3, now you're getting much more site specific. So for this one, we wanted to restore forest, meadow, and wildlife corridors, still pretty generic. And then you start going, okay, restore and protect mature forest habitat, 5 acres of high quality forest, patch numbers 72 and 75, located in this area. There's an existing fence, make it larger. And then restore 1 acre, patch number 83 and 84. If you're not this specific, it's easy to get for things to get lost over time and lose focus. So this is really specific about where to do things. Restore wildlife corridors along the Shabakon Creek, threatened by HAB. So that's associated with that. Conversion of lawn to tree shrubs and native tree shrubs and wildflowers. We left this a little bit more ambiguous, except for this one here, because we know that's a decision they have to make. But we basically said there's 253 patches of lawn equaling 73 acres. So you got a lot of room for improvement if you'd like to. And then this was, again, very site specific. The Green Lane Fields, patch number 50. We noticed when we walked out that this is on the edge of a practice area for sports. It wasn't getting mowed and there was all kinds of wetland plants coming back because it was so wet they couldn't mow it. So like, how about we formalize that? Don't mow that at all. Even if it happens to be dry enough to do it, don't run over it because you know it's going to get wet the next time. And how about you convert that to a wet meadow patch? So again, that's super site specific, and you don't know until you go out there what's going on. So deer management, this is almost like a placeholder slide. I have, if we get to it, I'm not sure we will. I didn't get to it last time, unfortunately, some of the more details about deer management. But this is just a placeholder right now to say, what we really want, we don't want no deer. We want to have higher quality, lower quantity deer. So you don't see bucks like this as often as you should. And that has to do with a really large population size and the quality of forage. But the idea is every hunter's dream is my dream too. We should be seeing fewer numbers of large, beautiful animals like this as opposed to a bazillion small ones. So that's the gist of that. We'll get into that if we can. Peter, question?
Yeah, sorry. You, I think pretty much answered. I was just going to ask
Okay.
what about that deer? What about that buck shouldn't be seen, I guess, but is its antlers or is it something else?
Yeah, basically the way hunters do it, and it's the gauge of the health of the animal it's the number of points.
Oh, okay. It is a point based.
Antler
Okay,
points. So
gotcha.
this is a very healthy 8-pointer. And trust
Yeah.
me, they go into more detail. The spread right here, how wide apart they are.
Uh-huh.
And then there's also a measurement, I think, of the total inches. I forget how that works. I don't know that much detail, but they get
Okay.
and dirty. But the bottom line is how many points and how wide is it? And that's
Got it.
associated with a healthier buck.
So seeing a 9 point buck like in a playground park area that isn't afraid of me is probably not a good indicator of
Well,
things for us.
it is an example of a healthy buck.
Yes.
But I'd rather see one of those than 50 other deer.
Fair enough. Got it.
And then invasive species control, the action codes that we mentioned, right? So action code 1, if it's truly emerging in the state, it's that stage 0 and 1, and even widespread species that aren't firmly established on a particular site could be a stage 1. Those are the ones you want to get rid of every living example of them on the property. And then 2 is you're being selective about where you do it, but you want to treat them knowing that you're not going to get rid of all of them. And then 3 is leave it off the radar for now. And, you know, again, this is a very detailed plan that takes a fair amount of time to develop. But obviously, if you have that type of money to buy a plan, I'm actually the TCNJ one, we got a grant, so it wasn't their money, but we got a grant for that one. But we go down to detail. Here's everything. So goal number 2 is selective invasive control. 2-1 is Morrow's honeysuckle. Based on the cover and the area, we come up with a formula and estimate the amount of cost over 10 years to get rid of it. How about Photinia? That'll cost you roughly $380. Again, these are ballpark estimates. They're not meant to be exact quotes that we would then come back and say, oh yeah, give us $380, we'll get rid of your Photinia. But it gives you a sense of how much effort would be. You know, so porcelain berry is $8,800, clearly a big difference than $380. And then we go down the line for every one of them, and then you get into the restore, create 10-acre forest exposure. That's going to be $80,000. You know, so you could look at these, we prioritize them, and you can say, I'm gonna, and what TCNJ did in reality was, we see your goal 3-1A, and we're going to apply for a grant, and they got it, and now they're going to be able to put up that fence. So you're kind of trying to give them a sense of what might they be able to do, what now that is in their head to do. Now they find a grant like, hey, that could do goal 3-1A, and then they apply for the grant and get it, and away we go. So that's just an example. And so, right, let's look through some of the plans that we've done. It's on our website. Again, there's a link there. You can see it's reasonably updated. I'm sure there's things that aren't on there that should be, but it's reasonably updated, and there's plenty of examples to look at. Right, so for the College of New Jersey, there was 4 properties, the acreages of the campus and the various Ewing Township parks. It was also part of the grant was community engagement. We had those interns pictured there, which I kept laughing every time I see this picture. They arranged themselves perfectly in height order, which I thought was amusing for some easily amused. Yeah, so we worked with them. They joined us in the field. None of these kids were, I can say kids because they're not here, young adults were field ready. They had never trumped through the woods. Like we go on trails, yeah, but we also make straight lines through the woods, which most people are not accustomed to. And they were troopers. They were great. And then they helped out with other aspects of the plan as well. The write-up afterward. And they came up with suggestions of their own as well at the end. So we had stewardship targets, converting lawn to meadow. The Shabacon Creek is very important, repairing corridor through the project area. We talked about deer management and invasive control, just like we mentioned. And TCNJ had been doing things. You know, they had made meadow patches prior to us writing the plan, so they were dipping their toes in the water on this. Yeah, so okay, so that was that plan, and a lot of the examples I showed you were from there already. So this is a completely different plan, the South Mountain Reservation. We did not have funding. This is like what 2,100 acres, mercy. We did not have the ability to really do the same level of mapping of patches like we do on smaller sites. So we kind of had a fallback position. We knew beach is a huge problem. There was not a problem. It was great. There's plenty of beach there, but now it's a problem because they're all dying. Yep, Pauline.
Thank you. What you're saying is making me wonder, what do you do? Like, let's say you have 20 acres that you're trying to manage. Are you actually walking through all 20 acres of that? Or like, how do you map it out? Like, how do you determine that, where the invasives are and what the coverage is?
Yeah, if you're doing fine level patch mapping, you would absolutely walk the entire site. Now, with with experience with aerial photography and even using the soil types and stuff like that, you don't necessarily have to lay your eyeballs on every square centimeter. You could see signatures in the aerial photography, and you basically stitch the patches together at the end. You have extensive GPS tracks of where you walked. You have pictures telling you what was there. You have notes written down all over the place. And then you look at the map and go, oh, I see where I walked. And I see every time I took a point, that means something changed. And I could look at the aerial map. I could look at the 1930 map and go, oh, this is the old 1930s patch. I didn't see every last bit of its total perimeter, but I have notes. I could see when it changed, and I go to the 1930 aerial and I draw a patch around it. So that's kind of what we do. Yeah. Oftentimes it's just as much time indoors as outdoors drawing those patches. But 20 acres is reasonably doable. If there's trails within it, that really helps focus you spatially about where you were, as opposed to randomly walking through the woods. So yeah, but yeah, you would do that. That would be the level you would do to map out patches in detail. And I'll get to easier ones too, like where you don't have to do this level of detail. I'm just trying to show you this is sort of the full thing. So this is actually a step back. This South Mountain, we drew patches, but we did not clearly delineate them, just like I just described. We did our best with, outrageous amounts of photos. We walked every mile of this trail, of all of their trail system. And you could obviously, the forest is relatively empty, so you can kind of like, if you're walking here, you're seeing a pretty good distance into it. And then if you're walking here, you can see a pretty good distance into it. And actually all of these boundaries are trails or roads, all of the surrounding boundaries. So it's a little bit more coarse. And this one is showing the amount of beach within this. So is it 50 to 75, or is it, very low cover or very high cover? And this would obviously inform you as the beach die. It sure looks like these darker purple ones are going to be a big problem. Even 26 to 50 is a tragically large increase in light hitting the ground prior to the infestation of the beech trees. So we ended up having a bunch of native plant species, enlisted birds. We used iNaturalist on this site. Our heritage database search returned trap rock glade communities, which are globally rare, and Torrey's mountain mint, which is a globally rare plant found on the globally rare trap rock glade communities. So we went and visited those, assessed those specifically in much more detail. We also looked at the vernal pools. The group South Mountain Conservancy and other volunteers have been really active. So they had vernal pool data, like what they were seeing for years. We had a lot to work with there. There's so many visitors, and again, so many iNaturalist observations that really helped augment what we saw. And it was pretty clear there's too many deer. Although their number has gone down, there's still not much observable recovery. We found 69 different invasive species. Again, a little mind numbing to have that big of a number of individual species, and then we determined the extent of the beach. And then again, we mapped these out. We did a relative quality from clean to infested. Actually, we just did 3, mixed, infested, and clean. The vernal pool locations, their forest exclosures, vernal pools. This is the site that here's everything you got, and the relative quality of the background. We ended up, based on this, we ended up saying this chunk of the reservation between this road and bound by this road and this road, overall, that's where you should be spending the great majority of your time. The green areas, you want to get rid of all of your emerging species, keep these green areas as clean as you can. work on pushing back on the edges of the green. You're not going to get rid of everything in number 39, but you might want to push back a little bit. Protecting your rare communities, protecting your vernal pools is a very high priority item. So yeah, there's all the different things that sort of fell out of all of that. Again, with the goal of maximizing your effectiveness. 2,100 acres is just too dang big. So how can we make that smaller? Okay, this is an area you should be focusing most of your activity. This side here was just outrageously degraded. Oh my goodness, it was so sad. But it was really, really bad. So the basic ones, again, white-tailed deer, strategic invasive control, protect your highest quality areas, and do monitoring, especially to keep up with the vernal pools and keep up with the forest health, because they do have a deer management program existing. And in the end, we were actually contracted by the South Mountain Conservancy and Essex County to start implementing the plan. So that started this year. And part of what we did was this beautiful but very horrific sapphire berry. We killed 34 populations of it this year with funding that they provided. So here's another example. So this is the White Lake Natural Area. This is in Warren County, 550 acres in Hardwick. We partnered with New Jersey Audubon. So they had received a grant to do a forest stewardship plan there. And then they hired us to specifically focus on the invasive species and the rare plant communities, the mapping of them. So we did that. There ended up being 17 acres out of the 515 that had globally rare limestone fen communities. If you're a plant geek, this is nirvana. Pitcher plants and grass of Parnassus, and it's just Shangri-La for botany geeks. And we also found 5 acres of habitat for a globally rare northern meadowlark butterfly, and we identified 130 acres of higher quality forest. Surprise, surprise, too many deer. And here we only found 11 emerging invasive species. So much less than we found in South Mountain. And then again, same kind of thing. You map out the patches, high, medium, low. You get a sense that there's a big glut of good over here. Probably want to focus a lot of your attention here. All of these communities around the edge of the pond, there's a number of these that are where those limestone fens were located. And this one was an amazing limestone fen right here that was actually very lightly infested. Some of them, fortunately, the lake is a lot of Phragmites eating up the fens. Very sad. So there was no management there. So we said, start a program, do your invasive species control, and really focus on these globally rare plant communities that are pretty darn close to irreplaceable. So we had very specific strategies. We understood at least the outlines of the biology of these critters and what they needed. And we said, if you do these things, you'll help them survive.
Can I ask a question about the South Mountain Reservation?
Yep.
I go up there regularly, and there's just an astonishing amount of Japanese knotweed. Do you know if there are any plans to eradicate that? And I'm wondering if you have any order of plants in terms of how ecologically degrading they are. Like you took our sapphire berry, but what about the Japanese knotweed? Wouldn't that be considered more invasive, or is it an easy?
The problem with it is that it's so bad that it's essentially irreversible without a really large slug of money, several large slugs of money, because the whole Rawway River, the majority of it, the edges of it are severely infested. Certainly a lot of the roadsides around the reservation are severely infested. Our recommendation was basically, if you find it here and there, small patches, get rid of it so it doesn't keep spreading. But otherwise, it's too far gone and would suck up every last bit of oxygen in any budget for itself, leaving other things that are highly threatening that you have a better chance of doing something about. unchecked. So it really became a prioritization where, as bad as it is, you got to recognize when you can't do nothing. I like to say that don't start a fight you can't finish. And that's exactly how I see invasive species. And there is no way to, if you started that fight, there's no way to finish it.
Mm.
Now, the South Mountain Conservancy did do control on knotweed very close to one of the vernal pools. And they
Okay.
had, so, in certain cases you would say, oh, heck, well, we said the vernal pool was really important. How can you ignore the knotweed patch next to it? Fair enough, right? But going down the entire Rawway River and trying to clear it from its banks would not be, just wouldn't be able, you can't do it.
Right, okay.
Mike, with respect to White Lake, do you think that there is any plan or desire to go forward with any actions? I know that the
Yeah.
Region Valley Conservancy used to manage it, and then the county took over, and it seems to
Right.
have gotten worse since then.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know. But it wasn't clear to me whether there was going to be resources to implement. Um, and that, unfortunately, that could be the fate of a lot of plans. You know, they just don't have, they have a land steward there that, basically has to focus a lot on the user experience kind of stuff because White Lake's pretty popular and isn't given a lot of time to actually do stewardship. Um, so yeah, it's unfortunate. I've watched that Phragmites spread over the last 2+ decades, and they've poked at it a little bit, but never in a way that actually resulted in a real win. And all the time, limestone fens that are globally rare are getting eaten alive by Phragmites.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I know that the meadows too are being overtaken. I mean, because those, on
yeah,
the left side of the driveway is like all natural meadow. So, okay.
yeah, no, I hear you, and I only live like 20 minutes from there, so it's a little nearer and dearer to me than many other sites, but it's not been happening, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you.
Um, you know, if there were enough interested people, perhaps there could be a volunteer stewardship team formed around White Lake, and talk to the county and see if they're willing to allow that to happen. But, that is definitely something, again, you're not going to get rid of all the Phragmites around the lake with volunteers, but there's many things that they could do to improve White Lake if, that was an interest to anyone. So yeah, as far as implementing a plan, in a lot of cases like White Lake and Warren County, they don't have stewardship staff really, certainly not full-time staff. There's one guy that's part-time, and he has a lot of other things to do. Other places have full steward, a nonprofit land trust, for example, is more likely to have some staff. No one has enough at all. That's for sure. And I think that's where volunteer stewardship teams could really help individual pieces of land, and work that relationship with whoever the landowner is, a municipality or a county or whatever, so that something good could happen on the site, even if the landowner does not have the resources to put into it. Yeah, so I had mentioned this previously, you can go on our website and looks like we have 32 of them now. I think there's several more that are in the hopper that we didn't put on the map yet. And I'm sure there's others that I don't know about, that we would love to put on the map. But when we get volunteer requests from the public come to the strike team because they've heard of it or there's a website for us, I'll say, take a look at this webpage. If there's anyone near you, the best bang for your buck would be to join one of these teams and help an existing effort rather than going out on your own. And I hope to see more. I would love to see everything that it does exist as a green dot. So knowing what's out there, and then I'd like to see as many more as possible added to it over time, because I really think this is a huge way for people to connect with land and
Environmental Commission.
practice stewardship. Excuse me.
Oh, send me.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had a question. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so this is on our website. And here's another example. So this is a smaller one now. We're getting smaller in scale. I believe, I can't remember. This is, well, shoot, 2 years seems like 1,000 years sometimes, but I think this was somewhere in the, I don't know, $1,500 range. I can't remember. But basically it was a 1 day walk with the folks that are called me up to say they like this place. We walked a bunch of their trails and I just made visual observations. There's no drawing of patches or anything like that. You can't possibly do 115 acres in less than a day. So they pointed out things that they had started to do. I pointed out, different things that they might want to pay attention to. So I think was one of the cases. Did we map these or did they give these to us? We might have mapped their trails. I don't remember. But so 1 day on site, a small to moderate plan. Um, we did, action codes for what we saw. I can't claim that I saw everything. I mean, I can never claim that I saw everything, but definitely 1 day cruising around, I'm definitely not going to see everything on 115 acres. High priority invasive species locations, so I did take points whenever I saw them. I gave them a native plant list. Again, as I'm cruising around and taking notes on 10 things at once, so it's not a complete native list, but it gives you some sense of what's there. That could be added to it like an iNaturalist thing. And then prioritize stewardship recommendations. And I take plenty of characterizing photos. I'm saying but there's other folks at Friends of Hopewell Valley that can do this. Take characteristic photos of what they're seeing so they could basically tell the story in pictures so someone can get a really quick hit on what exactly is going on here. You could give it to a volunteer and in a very short period of time they can get the gist. So we had a number of recommendations there, but they're all going to be, they're following sort of our basic stewardship philosophies. Get rid of all the emergings, hunt deer, get rid of all the emergings, protect the clean areas, restore when possible. Foots Pond Wood, this is an amazing group. They've actually become their own 501c3 nonprofit. They're outrageous. Susan and John Landau. And they're very good about if you had a question, if you wanted to start one of your own teams up, like you could actually reach out to them. Those dots on the map I showed you, you can click them and it has email addresses and people's names. But they're outstanding, absolutely outstanding.
This is Kim. Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yep.
Susan is taking this course.
Yeah.
And there she is. There she is. And it is outstanding. It is outstanding. And
Yeah, without the pictures of the faces of the people and like I can't see the list. Like I knew she was at other ones, but I totally wasn't even thinking she was here, to be honest with you. So that was an honest endorsement. I am not
no, it's an absolutely amazing example. I've been there several times. I was just there with gosh, I was just there for a tour this summer with the Native Plant Society, and I just your help, Jean Epiphan's help, it's just I mean, and John and Susan are so devoted. It's amazing. Susan.
absolutely.
But Mike, we kind of cheat because we are selecting areas that are, that are the most public and have access to water. They're on the trails, so that we really haven't made a dent acreage wise, but we've kind of made a dent educationally. And so it looks pretty to people as they can see the empty invaded forest. They can see a little pocket of restored forest. So they kind of, anyway, but thanks for the shout out. We're struggling like everybody else, but we're really happy to talk to anybody and share ideas.
How many pounds was that porcelain berry root that you pulled out?
Oh gosh, that's so true. Oh,
I would not underestimate yourself too much. It's been a lot of work. I know you know that.
yeah, and we've learned so much from you to be able to use the volunteers in a much more efficient way over the years. There are some things, like you say, that are just, you're not going to win. And we have sheet mulched a forest floor, which is absolutely ridiculous, but it works, and the town has lots of wood chips, so.
Cool. And the ground is all the better for adding those wood chips back in.
Yeah,
It definitely restores the soil to a more natural state with wood chips for various reasons. I won't prattle
Yeah.
on more, but it's a great thing.
so anyway, thanks for the shout out, but really, if we're happy to talk to anybody, you can come see what we're struggling with. And we're putting all of Mike's advice to use.
Yeah, and it was a pretty short, I mean, that was one of the shorter visits. It was probably early on when I started doing this.
Yeah,
But you could see the strategies. They're very basic, right? There was 9 action code 1 species as I was divining trees. These are all very clear, actionable things that if you want to tell a volunteer who just shows up, what are you guys doing here? Okay, here's what we're doing in priority order. Um, and maybe they show up after you've already done all the divining and you say, we did that one, check, done. And obviously they created their own much more refined set of goals, but this is, to me, this is enough to get any group anywhere started. So yeah, this was a very basic plan early on in this process that we were doing these smaller, relatively short site visit and making recommendations. We did a similar thing for Bordentown City. They contracted with us because it was a much bigger job. It was 8 different sites, but similar kind of outcome. For every park, we created various plans that were similar, shared observations, found some really crazy stuff that I did not want to see, Chinese yam and paper mulberry, which are super uncommon to find, especially that far north. So we gave them a series of recommendations. So it was a little bit more in depth, but still it wasn't mapping patches to it was basically saying this park deserves more attention than that park because you have a better chance of starting and finishing your fight. The other sites were like, wow, they're so degraded. It would be hard to imagine having enough resources to lift them. And we've done similar things with private landowners. So I'm trying to say, like, no matter who you are, there's things that are applicable to you. So this was part of our U.S. Forest Service grant, and we did plans for 50 different properties around the entire state in the highest priority forest areas. These tend to be larger landowners, but now that we're talking about individual landowners, not a volunteer stewardship team, individual landowners and what they might do on their properties. And we've done this at scale now too, not through this grant, but we do this at scale for, you have 2 acres or a half an acre, or whatever the case may be, anywhere where there's natural cover that isn't tended regularly. So, we try to make it so that everyone can participate on their own lands. One of the sites we did through that grant was Hartshorn Woods in Monmouth County. They have an amazing stewardship team there. If you haven't heard of the Stewardship Roundtable, it exists, and we're going to visit this site on the 28th of October. And we identified priority species. We mapped out a 39-acre porcelain berry infestation. That's quite something. And then, this is what it looked like. I nearly fell off my chair if I were sitting in a chair. And they actually have this thing called Story Map, which is part of the GIS stuff. So you can click on that and take a look. They're a really great group down there. And there is an opportunity to get a guided tour from them in a couple of weeks. I see a question, Jim.
Yes, I'm really glad that you mentioned property owners, small property owners. We own about 1.25 acres in Somerset County.
Okay.
And starting in 2009, we started transitioning a 1/4 acre into a native species meadow. We're adjacent to a feeder brook to the North Branch. And over the past, how many years that is, 12, 15 years, we've been managing it in a way to advance native species. We have over 100 species identified and probably 20 or 25 invasives. Now, our issue is it's really small, so we may not have the resources available to us. All the resources that come to us come out of our pocket and our knowledge and gaining things. And we had great assistance in the beginning from Emil DeVito, who helped us lay out the meadow and helped us in the beginning. We're getting to the point now where we're dealing 75 or 80% of our time are dealing with invasives, even on just a little quarter acre. We're trying to modify the space to make it more forested, less open, and hopefully that'll help control some of the things. But we're definitely looking for whatever kind of assistance we can get. We're both in our 70s, and we're hoping to manage this as long as we can. And trying to get as much help as we can to do that. And I'm wondering what kind of assistance is available to small property owners like us to help us do that.
It really is hard to get assistance. So there are, I mean, I don't know what their status currently is for funding, but there's the NRCS, which is Federal Department of Agriculture. If you had, I don't remember their threshold, but it was, say, 10 acres, you might be eligible for cost share arrangements. So again, there's no one that covers your scale, unfortunately. But if you again,
it's really not the cost we're concerned about. It's the techniques, how to actually do it. We've tried solarizing, which has some success. If we allow it to go to 2 or 3 years to actually be effective. We've been hesitant in using herbicides because
of the brook.
We have a feeder brook into the North Branch. We don't want to endanger the water quality of that. So we've been, we've tried to be really sensitive to the brook and still trying to deal with the invasives. And in the last,
jig a lot.
In the last conversation, we did get a lot of benefit from the herbicides that you brought up in that conversation, in that presentation, and we're certainly going to consider those. But I think one of the things that might help us is maybe to expand our knowledge in how to have a long-term control of this. I mean, we're trying to implement a more forested area in the lower portion near the brook, oaks, and we have river birch lining the brook to help the brook itself. But we'd like to transition.
I mean, I help people with individual problems on phone and email on a very regular basis. So like specific questions I could answer just, in the course of a day. Coming up with more planning would require a visit and all that kind of stuff, which we really don't have the capacity to. If folks have paid us to come look at their individual properties. So that's an option if you want to do that. But individual questions, I'm ready to answer or try to answer them anytime.
Can we pay you?
We could talk. You could email me. We could talk about how we might do something. If you need an extensive amount of consulting, like more than just a phone call, then we could talk about it.
Okay.
You have his email?
And now I'm going to recommend, because in lieu of time, that we let Mike finish his presentation, and then if he's feeling generous, maybe he can answer a few more questions at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, so I think I was done with this one, but yeah, if you're interested, check out that story map when you get the presentation. Like I said, they're a really impressive group down in Monmouth County Parks. And this is an example of a private land that's, obviously larger than most people's private lands with 70 acres. We did a different type of mapping there. We didn't do patches, but we did a little bit more detail than some of our other projects. But, it's again, it's a limestone community. This is a limestone sinkhole pond, which is a globally rare community, the things growing on the edges. So there's a lot of neat things there. We gave them a 10-year stewardship plan. You know, this property, the landowner does outrageous amounts of work on their own, and they also invest in hiring contractors. I think they hire their forester to do a lot of work. Since it was part of a grant, the grant paid us to do some of the work for her. So this is a really amazing private landowner, just doing an amazing job with trying to bring back limestone forest and rare plant communities and rare species. Lots of restoration too. So I think I will stop there. Maybe I'll just go through a couple points on deer management, just so that they're, you know, if you know of your municipality or county doing something, or a land trust, you know, just give you a couple quick highlights. You know, the deer numbers are clearly very high. This is again in Hopewell, that the status, many lands are not hunted at all. And those that remain, most of them are just recreational hunting and not deer management to dark green. So you could have very difficult situations about controlling deer at scale in this situation, and in others, like when it's lots of development or almost solid development. Safety zones are an issue. This crazy looking map is how one of my projects, this dark green is one of my preserves. It's surrounded by no hunting areas. It has tons of safety zones. So you can hunt, you know, in this portion down to here, and otherwise you can't hunt most of it. And when you try to hunt here, deer run to all the areas that are not hunted around it. So challenging. I'll skip this one, it takes a little bit too time, but we have rules for our deer management program. We do not tend to charge for anything or ask them to do anything other than take deer. We have forest monitoring. One of our great volunteers, Mary. We have data that shows the trends over time. Again, this is not necessarily required, but it's good to know whether what you're doing is working or not. And you can get success. There's a Baldpate Mountain with these two very cool birds, hooded warblers and Kentucky warblers, and spicebush, again, like I showed you at Duke Farms. This is not fenced in any way. The barberry getting crushed by spicebush. And I think I'll stop there. We could do more questions for the rest of the way out.
Well, Mike, this is Kim. I think we need an entire class on deer management.
I'd be happy to talk about deer management.
Right. Oh, can we have you back in the spring then to do that? Because we have so many people that have come across writing us in and really asking for that specifically, and that it's always an issue.
Absolutely. And yes, I would be happy to. And I think that effort going on, being with New Jersey Conservation Foundation, I think by then they'll probably be like, they're calling them playbooks at this point, like a playbook for a private landowner. How would you go about it? What are the issues to consider? So we could use that as a guide for a class or whatever, but I'd be happy to talk about it.
This is Mary Roberts, from Union County again. I had contacted you once before about doing, a survey of the area, of our area. It's only about 5 acres, but I think it's at a critical time that we really, this year it's all stilt grass, right? I mean, there's other things there, but let's say primarily it's the stilt grass that's covering over the carex. We have amazing populations of carex. So I was hoping that we'd get a little bit more of an idea of what we could do. We probably, a half of an acre, we hand pulled the carex out. And I think from your information, we weed whacked it at the wrong time. I guess I mean, how much would it cost for us, a small operation like us, to get a workable plan? Or can we even deal with it? You know, what's the best way to
It's a
deal
Union
with
County. Is it a Union County property, you said?
Union County property?
I see. Yeah, we did a big plan for Watchung several years ago, but,
Right. This is just a small section of Unami Park where they got it to stop mowing and left the leaves. And then it's somewhat of a lower land, not wetlands, but not mesic either. And it's just the carex populations that we've uncovered are really remarkable. We even think we might have found Typhinia, which is a rare carex. Anyway, I don't know what to do, but I do not feel like I'm the leader. And I think, I've got people following me. Like we had 20 people out there pulling silk grass, but not of it. It has to be useful to them. I can't just waste people's time. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know
up
what to
to
do.
you, your relationship with the county and trying to get them to get resources for that spot.
They're not going to get us
Technically,
anything. I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is if we could raise the money, we call ourselves the Unami Forest people. We would get the money maybe to how much would it cost for us to get
And
some kind of plan?
And I'm just going to jump in here, Mary. I don't know if we should put him on the spot for that. It's up to
Okay,
you, Mike, but maybe that's a conversation that you could email him about. I think
right.
he's been really
yeah,
generous in giving everybody his email, but that we would all love to hire you. I think we all have those projects, and I think kind of nailing you to a price right now is.
No, I didn't even mean that, but I just meant in general, what can we hire? You? Would you be interested in a project this? And I guess, how would we get the money? We can raise the money somehow, but
yeah, we could talk separately.
okay,
Yep.
yeah.
We do this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, we try to help people to the extent we can, and obviously most of our funding is coming from grants or contracts, so we can't I'd love to have so much money that could go wherever and help anyone
Right.
for free, but we just aren't in that position, so we have to ask for
So
payment.
are there grants that we can apply for
Um,
that you know of? I mean, and just because,
yeah, we could talk about it. I
okay,
would I would probably think not, unfortunately, but we could
okay,
talk.
okay, okay, thank you. So pulling stilt grass, is that all feasible? Is it's got to be sprayed?
You could spray it with something called Assure
Oh,
2
we can't,
at half
Mm.
label strength, and that would keep your sedges and lose your stiltgrass.
but we can't spray because we don't have anybody to spray. So
Right, you'd have to hire someone to spray.
is pulling stilt grass a reasonable?
Yeah, we could, I think we could talk more about it, but
Okay.
it's reasonable if you keep up with it for years.
Years? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't know whose names or if anyone else, I see hands. I don't know who, Macwa is the label? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that's just our name cut off.
Okay.
So I manage three kind of smallish plots, probably between a tenth and a quarter of an acre each. Two are on our property and one is on private church property. We're all trying to manage all three of them for, really pollinator habitat. And the trouble I have is that in all three cases, the invasives are completely intertwined with the natives that we've deployed. So I've got honeysuckle intertwined all around warm season grasses. I've got mugwort, all throughout my milkweed patch. And then we've got, I think it's Chinese bush clover. It might be the Lespedeza.
That's a bad one.
That probably came in a load of clean fill that we had donated to us when we pulled some asphalt tailings out of the church property. So, and in that case, we put out a bunch of warm season grasses and goldenrods and things like that. So they're just so mixed. Sometimes I can go out there and spend like a couple hours and I've cleared a patch that's like 2 foot because I'm like cutting stem by stem or spraying stem by stem. The resources that you presented last week, I think, gonna be really helpful because I've just been doing glyphosate across the board. So I'm going to be try to be more targeted with our herbicide. Fortunately, it's all private property, and it's all upland, so we can spray what we want.
Okay.
But what do we do about the fact that it's just so intermixed with the natives that we've spent time and money putting out?
Yeah, I had a similar one earlier this year. I mean, it's not an uncommon situation with someone. I went to their house and we were trying to figure this out, but you basically have to start trying to. I would need more time to give you more specifics, but the general gist is separate things out in time and selectivity of herbicide. So if you have native warm season grass with a bunch of honeysuckle on it, use a broadleaf herbicide. and it won't hurt your grass, but it'll kill the broadleaf plant.
Okay.
Just as one example. You know, there might be some places that they're so screwed up, the egg is so scrambled, and there's less and less natives every year in a particular spot. Just start over. Just completely wipe that spot out one way or the other and start over. You know, so even within a meadow, you could have separate strategies within the meadow. It wouldn't be one strategy for the whole meadow. It'd be like, over here, do step 1, then 2, then 3. Over there, start over. It's lost. You know, so you could have a variety of strategies even within one meadow, like you're describing. You hope that doesn't happen, but it does. Yeah, so I think that gives you a gist of what it would be. So an herbicide that's selective for a particular type of plant. Timing of year, you could spray honeysuckle if a native plant or whatever, the native plants are all dormant and there's no little green leaves above ground, even in winter, and there's honeysuckle, you could spray that honeysuckle without hurting anything in the winter. So timing.
Okay, thank you. I may follow up with you know, as things green out in the spring, maybe I'll just send you some pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
I had one other quick question. We also purchased some woods behind our property that do not, knocking on wood right now, do not appear to be too invaded, but they're also just scrubbed out. We know there's a ton of deer back there, and there's just really no understory. Is it worth it? Because I had this crazy idea to just like buy some deer fence and staple it to the trees. Like, is this worthwhile? Because I just thought, let's see what comes back. I've seen some wintergreen. I might have seen a, you know, a lady slipper or two, and I'm like, maybe there's still some seed bank.
I would do a mini exclosure in your case. Buy a 50-foot roll of galvanized 5-foot tall metal fencing, get some rebar or some good solid post like that that's cheap, and just make a perimeter around the area where you see little sprigs of life. Put an exclosure around that. I would not staple things to trees as a general idea because trees sway, and if you have fencing, it could rip plastic fencing right apart with one windstorm. So I would do isolated small mini metal fence exclosures.
So it's worth a try. It's not a crazy idea.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think Deborah maybe is next.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a quick question. Back on the Japanese knotweed, which is my thorn in my side. So since our last class, I went down, we have this stream area, our neighbors have it on the stream bank, and I did some spraying, and then we have some other neighbors behind the house and they let me spray. And I've been going back for the last week or two, and I'm looking at it and it looks way too healthy. Like, how would you know? Like, how long does it take usually or how will you know that it's working?
Yeah, it can vary a little bit, but you know, if you've gone like 3 weeks and it still looks really green, then definitely didn't work.
Okay, it's been like a week or two, so give it more.
Give it a little bit more time. It's hard. It's also hard this time of year because it's going to start going dormant too. So it's a good time to do it, but it's not going to give you that immediate gratification of it all turning brown right away. And it could just be going dormant and it could come up the next year. You won't know until next year. Knotweed is the devil. You absolutely have to. Let's see what happens when it comes up next year, no matter what you do.
Yeah, I'm thinking even like cutting it before it seeds and reseeds, you know.
That's a good idea.
A small area and bagging it, I guess, and then putting and I only did like a 2% glyphosate solution. I think it was like 2 to 5%. So I don't know. Would you recommend going more for not?
Yeah, because knotweed is so hard. I would go 5.
Okay.
I would go 5%. The timing is good. I think we talked about the ideal timing. For the ideally, you would cut it in June to the ground, let it come back up, and then late in the year spray it. That's going to be the most effective way if you can muster that.
Oh, cut it in June. Cut it
in June and then spray the resprouts, you know, late summer, early fall.
Okay. I didn't realize. I thought I had to wait for fall.
Well, you've given it a little kick in the butt, so you could see what happens to it next year and then try to do that next year, do the cutting and then spraying the sprouts.
Do you think cutting and the spraying of the stems at this time of year is helpful?
No, the timing has to be so you're trying to exhaust the root. So it uses only root energy to come up in the spring, and then you cut it off and it has a smaller root then that smaller root sends another shoot up. Again, the root's smaller again. Now you whammo with the herbicide.
Got it. Okay. All right. So that's a long process. Thank you.
Oh yeah. And then whatever survives the first year of that, you got to hit it again the next year. So I would be on it for at least a few years to make sure.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, I was just curious, kind of like along the lines of, you develop your like 10-year stewardship plan, regardless of size of like management area or whatever it is, um, for public land. I'm, and this is at the local level, so no county environment or no county involvement or anything like that, just purely like working with the town council and DPW. How how do you start to work on that like relationship, and like in your experience when you have sort of a, let's say, reluctant uh both DPW and council, how
That's
do you
very common. That's very common because it's not necessarily going to be perceived by most as a high priority item. Um, I would talk to those volunteer stewardship teams because I think many of them they have to work to relate. If it's a municipally owned land, which is fairly common for the volunteer stewardship teams, not always, but often, they've had to deal with their municipality. So I think, reaching out to people on that list and asking how they solved their issue or how did they manage their relationship, because obviously no matter what we do, the landowner has to be in agreement. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, in our case, it's very much like, we might have full like, this is the right quote unquote like thing to do, but it's like, just, you're effectively like stonewall, like you're walled at like, oh well, I can't buy the seed just to like put down some like buffer crop or something like that, right? Like, it's just kind of curious in terms of like, from a stewardship angle, is it just common persistence in your experience, or is it like, are there
I'm hoping Susan is
tricks?
raising her hand to answer or at least provide guidance on this. No? Okay. I mean, just because your face is right there on my screen, you reach out to Susan. I think, she's one example of, she has it's a municipally owned land. But there's others, but yeah, I think I mean, I know secondhand kind of stuff, and it'd probably be more helpful to hear from someone who's firsthand dealt with their municipality or managed that relationship.
And then I'm going to ask that Susan Landau be the last question. Well, the second to last, because I actually have one little small question, and then I have a little surprise. So, Susan, you are the second to last question here tonight. Thank you.
So Peter, definitely email me because working with towns, there are ways into towns, so we could talk. But I just, Mike, wanted to thank you because you unite all our little teams and big teams that are struggling all with the same thing, but we can rely on you and everybody else and the start you get. We had no idea what we were doing, and Mike he didn't find much native at all. And when we walked through and I looked at him and said, but at least we have some wild flocks. And I don't remember telling me it was Dame's Rocket. And because we didn't know anything, but you gave us the start. And when we find things are not going well, if I come back to your basic principles of how to use volunteer time and take a place that's good and keep it good and just use the basic parameters you set out, it really, really helps. So I mean, it's wonderful. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that Mike is the glue for the state. So thank you. And for Foots Pondwood, I mean, if there's anything we can do to tour with somebody, you can see our struggles, you can see the bits of progress we make too. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for doing this class.
Yeah, thank you for doing this class. And Susan, you are a really good example of, you and John, of doing this major project, but not taking on more than you can chew. Like you just, no, I mean, you do it, you do it. You take a section at a time. And I think a lot of us see the big project and don't really examine how, many years over time that is going to take. And you have led or been a really amazing example for me and just being able to take little sections at a time.
Well, came from.
I think that's really critical. Yeah, that's really important. I mean, I'm like Captain ADD personally, but if you take that approach to stewardship, you will absolutely lose. You gotta focus. You absolutely have to and be dogged.
And on that note, I am going to ask Mike one question, and I have a neighbor that is right next to me, and she is ill, and she has Japanese honeysuckle just taking over her yard. We have no access to pesticides. Is that something that I can dig out? I've volunteered to help her, and I just want to help her get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, cutting it down off of things that it's climbing up would be step one. I think you have to be really persistent, but people have told me that repeated hand pulling really does hurt it pretty hard. But again, you have to be very persistent about it. Um,
Right.
and if you did, you could also, if herbicide ever became an option, it is one that dies pretty readily with herbicide.
Okay.
And if you time it for a winter application, you wouldn't necessarily hurt anything else. So
Oh.
you could consider like do a big pull and cut down off of stuff. And then maybe the next year, if it's, do it again. If you need to just finish the darn thing off, give it a little hit of herbicide at the right time and it'll be gone.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. This has been an extraordinary opportunity to spend 4 weeks with Mike Van Clef. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. A couple of announcements. The Native Plant Society of New Jersey has a fall conference coming up on November 1st, and you can go to the website npsnj.org. It is called Weird NJ with 4 amazing speakers, all talking about weird native plants that
Cool.
are a little bit unusual. I also wanted you guys to know I heard about a documentary called Fools and Dreamers. You might have heard of it, called Regenerating a Native Forest. A man spends 30 years turning a degraded land into a massive forest. I'm sharing that link with you now, and
Sounds awesome.
I'll put it in the in my email to you tomorrow with the video. And then we have a new episode of The Wild Story that just came out last weekend. If you haven't listened to The Wild Story, it's a Native Plant Society podcast. Check that out too. Here is a link. And thank you again, everyone. You're just amazing. You're so supportive of the Native Plant Society, and I hope you're getting a lot out of these courses. And Mike, thank you very much.
No, it's a lot of fun. I loved it. The interaction is awesome. And it's not something I get. Typically, I'm trying to cram so much into one presentation. There's not as much back and forth. And I really enjoyed it.
That's great. This is so important. So, okay, everybody, have a great night. We'll see some of you tomorrow. And Nancy, Pauline, did you have, you're clapping. We will see some of you tomorrow in Nancy Lawson's final class. And then we will say goodbye to you guys for a while. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great.